what we're seeing is the beginning of this sort of third phase. In phase one, I think technology companies had a license to be naive, and in many cases they were. So, they just kind of built things, and they were still in the periphery of the economy. And that probably stopped somewhere around 2005 or six, when it was really clear that Google was sort of the all-encompassing destroyer of media. So as you level that and created more symmetry, the reality is that now we can all know the same things. And so the idea that then you would then imbue more trust, knowing more, is kind of counterintuitive to me. If anything, one should realize that their incentives are clearer to understand than ever before. Mm-hmm. And so instead, you should just sort of agree that live and let live is probably the only scalable strategy when there's information symmetry. When there's asymmetric information, you have to trust. So there's been a lot of chaos in the financial markets unwinding, and slowly we're getting a lot of information about what happened. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, these are really elegant bookends. So in early January, the first thing that we just talked about, this symmetry of information, is really what allowed GameStop to play out. The fact that everybody had access to the same information, and all of a sudden it turned out that it wasn't a highly sophisticated hedge fund, but it turned out to be a bunch of retail investors who saw that these stocks were so massively shorted.
Yep.
Meaning 130% short, 125% short, and they effectively ran a massive short squeeze and gamma squeeze on these guys. Mm-hmm. That never would have been possible before because the information wasn't available as easily. Mm-hmm. So we proved the symmetry of information creates equality. Mm-hmm. That was really interesting. But then we also proved that governments and systems can intervene and still muck it up, which left the open question, well, how would we prevent that from happening again? The way that you prevent that is by creating the right incentives. So one incentive would be around the risk limits that hedge funds are allowed to take. Mm-hmm. Another incentive would be that we have to settle trades in real time using a blockchain or something else so that you can't have these weird dynamics occur. It shows that the incentives aren't really still set up correct. This person was able to take an enormous amount of risk. The banks didn't have a coordinated way of seeing across each other's risk books that this same person theoretically could have been violating the agreements that they had with one. There's a simple agreement that we all have, which is, for example, if I go long or short a company, I'm not allowed to do that with leverage over and above 9.9%. Again, risk, leverage, and settlement of trades. Those three things, if you did those three things, you'd make it so much fairer for everybody. And so this thing is antitrust. You don't have to trust anything. And I think that that's an incredible uncorrelated hedge. So if the monetary system and fiscal policy is based on trust, Bitcoin is based on no trust, because you can read a blockchain and get to ground truth. And so what I would say now is that, I would probably view it as a system that has enormous value for that reason. In a world where trustworthiness will become less and less reliable, and that incentives will ebb and flow very quickly, one should have exposure to instruments that are not based on trust, but are based on truth. So over the long fullness of time, I think what we are going to teach people is the difference between speculating and investing. Investing really is about long-term capital allocation and taking a huge multi-year trend and being able to re-underwrite that. Speculating is when you have a bunch of volatility in any given month or year and react to it. So I think that not enough people have been taught the financial literacy to understand the difference. And I also think that it's amplified on Twitter and Reddit because I think that there's a machismo and a bravado around, these statements like diamond hands. And I see it even now, like the tenor of feedback that I used to get on Twitter was exclusively positive. And now there's so many haters. Number two is lack of experience. Yeah. And that's fine because I've been that person as well. But the reality is that, I had to learn the hard way, margin calls, losing money, how to be an investor, and how to temper my tendency to want to take risk. And I'm still learning. And so I do think that there will be volatility. I think that the more inflation there is, the more volatile we will be. And I hope that people will learn the financial literacy skills to learn how to analyze the things they own and figure out whether they want to own those things for a long time. When a kid gets born, the US government could put $2,000 into a savings account and just let it compound. The markets return 8% a year. So when that person is 65, you'll have hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's great. I do think that that's different from financial inclusion because the reality is that that's not enough. So it's a good start. It's to get people to cross that chasm between labor and capital, from being, a worker to being an owner, and teaching people how you can be both. And that, ownership is not reserved for the 0.001% of society. That's a good thing. But we need to do more. Most people still make most of their wealth in America through home ownership. Well, that's, much, much harder than it used to be because of housing affordability. That needs to change. To your point, most people don't understand the financial literacy skills to know how to underwrite something for 3 months versus 3 years versus 30 years. I'm not asking you to sell out Chicago. I don't think that that's taught anywhere. And so, these are skills that are hard fought. I found, not many particularly good resources, and I had to keep playing the game over and over, if you will, to learn the rules. So we need to do that as well, because if people can earn more, like if you look at income distribution in terms of 20% chunks, the bottom 60% spend beyond their income, and that supports the credit card and credit economy in America. Number of people that just run away, number one. The infrastructure that's crippled, the school system and how it's run, the virtue signaling that governs how decision-making in California works. They throw around this word, which is like such a loaded word. Honestly, I'm telling all of you, if you listen anything from what I'm saying, if you hear the word inequity, you should run away. Because the only word that matters is equality and inequality. Inequity is what people use to change laws to hold on to power. And when I saw that word being used over and over, why can't we have more vaccines? Inequity. Why can't this happen? Inequity, 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 inequity. Why are you going to shut down a magnet school for smart kids? Inequity. Why are you not getting the teachers back to school? Oh, because we needed to actually change the names of the schools. Inequity. And I thought, what is going on in this state? And if this happens in the 5th largest economy in the world, what will happen to the rest of the country? And then if we're all of a sudden supposed to get our act together and compete against this trading bloc and that trading bloc. So I wanted to test. I wanted to see, do people care about centrism? I borrowed ideas from both the left and the right. And it was incredible. The most important thing, which I was looking for, I saw, Kara, which is the betting markets opened in the UK immediately when I announced. And you know what happened? You know who was even money? I was.